Hey, 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 this Kirblog's about Canada. All right, that's enough of that. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Voiceoctover 2016, where I'm speaking with various voice actor veterans from the US and Canada about their history of how they started and where they started. Today, we're talking about Vancouver, but with a lovely gentleman who is now living in beautiful Los Angeles. So you would know him today, particularly as the current and I would say most consistent voice of Rocket Raccoon in all of the Marvel animated series, various ones on Disney XD and otherwise. He's also a massive number of different characters from the Lego Star Wars movies, the Marvel motion comics, tons of different dudes from many of the Mobile Suit Gundam series, such as Flaga in particular. And he was just announced recently, thanks to the Kingsglaive movie, that he's the voice of Revis Nox Fleuret in Final Fantasy 15, which is awesome. Tons of other various cartoons, anime, video games. I'm joined today by the man they call Devall, Trevor. Hi, welcome.
Thank you. The man they call
Oh, I'm
Devall.
bringing it
I like
back.
that.
Yes.
I like it.
So I will cut right to the chase, my good sir. Give me your brief history of how, because we're going to get to where you are today soon, but a brief history of how you migrated to Vancouver from your hometown of Edmonton once upon a time.
Well, it was a passing asteroid I happened to hitch a ride on, and after a brief swing around the outer planets, from Edmonton, where I grew up and did my schooling went to university there. I took drama and stuff like that, and I was a director. I was a filmmaker, and so back in the late 90s, I decided, hey, you know what? Let's go to a place where I can actually make films, which at that time was Vancouver. So I packed up my pickup truck and my guitar, literally, and I drove to Vancouver and almost immediately fell into voice acting, mostly by a fluke because I didn't know it was a job at the time. But a friend of mine said, hey, you should do voice work. And I talked to my agent because I got an agent when I first got out there. And I said, yeah, I do voices and stuff. And he said, oh, well, it's very difficult to get in. I said, sure. And then he gave me an audition and I booked it and I've been working ever since. And how I got to LA was I had been working in voiceover for about 10 years or so. And I was on a show called Johnny Test, playing a character named Dookie. And the producer of that show was a fella by the name of Scott Fellows. And he was doing another show called Big Time Rush, which was a live action show for Nickelodeon. And they were doing a movie in Vancouver called Big Time Movie. And Scott needed someone to play the big British bad guy, the sort of James Bond villain, white suit, cat stroking the whole bit. And he wanted me to do it. And I was like, I got a face for radio, right? And he said, no, you'll be hilarious. So I did it, and it was great, and it was fun, and it was awesome. And afterwards, he said, oh, my God, you were the funniest thing in the movie. I'm going to set up a meeting with the Nickelodeon for you. And I was like, yeah, sure, Mr. Producer. But he did. And a week later, I got an email back from him going, okay, go down and meet them. And I was like, okay. So I flew to L.A., and I went to Nickelodeon in Burbank, and I met with the casting people there, and they were like, oh, you're great. You should come down and play with us in our sandbox. And I was like, yeah, sure. Because whatever, I got to go home. I got to go back to Vancouver and get back to work. And then a few other things happened when I was here. And basically, my friend Kiara Zani, who is a big voice actor as well, she was down here at the time. And she said, what are you waiting for? A red carpet? Like, come on, man. So I looked into getting my green card, just as sort of a lark. Like, oh, well, we'll look into it, but it's never going to happen, not in a million years. Anyway, long story short, after a year, I was living in Los Angeles in an apartment going, okay, I guess I live here now.
Guess I'm doing this all the time. Wow.
Yeah, how did that happen? And I still kind of look around and I go, in fact, it just happened to me yesterday morning. I just bought a house here and I woke up in this house, going, oh, I live here, I guess. How did that happen?
You actually reminded me too. I didn't write this down, but so how many years have you been doing this now for in total?
I did my very first professional job in 2000, in the fall of 2000. So,
Wow, so
16 years. Yeah.
Wow. All right, close
Yep.
to it. Yeah. My God. So back when you were in the gorgeous city of Vancouver, British Columbia, at least from my perspective, because it's a clean version of New York City.
It is a beautiful city, for sure.
I adore it. I've only been there a couple times, but it was life changing. So what were the early days of your career like? This would have been, I guess, the early 2000s. What was that was the time frame? What was the journey of like actually breaking into the VO scene like for you?
It was exciting, and it was weirdly comfortable in a way because I was lucky enough to do my very first show, which was called The Lost Continent, which never saw the light of day because they ran out of money before they could air it. But I was privileged to do that show with some of Vancouver's finest voice actors. I had no idea at the time, but I was working with Sam Vincent and Paul Dobson and David Kay was on that show and Brian Drummond and basically everybody was on that show in some capacity. And when I started working on that show, they just made it so comfortable for me. They were so welcoming and they were like, "Oh man, where you been? You're one of us. So come and party." And so it was great. And so what happened was in that very small market up there, when someone comes along who knows how to do the job, people start talking to each other and news travels fast. So within no time at all, I was booked on a couple of other anime shows, just doing like, I think my first anime that I ever got was Tem Ray on Gundam Mobile. No, which one?
Amuro's dad.
Yeah.
That's the first Gundam show. That's right.
Right,
Yeah, yeah.
right. So that was a role.
It was a dad in a couple episodes.
It was a dad in a couple episodes. But that was my first excursion into anime, and then I booked a few other shows, and so yeah, I just was doing that for a number of years, and then I kind of hit the prelay market big in 2004. So I was doing some guest stars and stuff, but I was doing mostly anime stuff, I guess, for the first couple of years. And then I hit the prelay market in 2004 with a show called Dragon Booster, where I played Mordred Payne, who was the bad guy. And that kind of opened up a whole new world for me. And then I started working on pretty much every show in town in some capacity, like even if I would do like a guest star or something like that. So that became my career for a long time, I was sort of the jack of all trades, master of none, but jack of all trades. So I would be involved with virtually every show in town, but in a very limited capacity. I would come in and play guest stars every now and then, but I almost never had a lead. But I was actually totally fine with that because it really allowed me to cut my teeth as a what they call a utility actor down here. So I learned a lot about how to be a lot of characters quick by doing anime as well as by being a utility guy up there for a long time. So but it was a great experience. It was a very exciting time. And as the years went by and I worked on more and more projects and higher profile projects and started to make more and more money. It was
which is nice, yeah.
Which is very nice. It was good. And then, slowly I got into the convention scene. I was like, what? There's people out there that want my autograph for this? What are they crazy? So yeah, and so it was great. It was. I think that as a Canadian guy, it was probably the best place to start my voice career was in Vancouver because not only was it some of the best voice talent around, but it was also it was also, like I said, a small enough market that you could break in relatively quickly if you knew what you were doing, which I guess I did. I mean, I didn't know I knew what I was doing, but it turned out I did. So, yeah.
Well, here's something, because you were talking about every show in town. I actually want you to help me clear up a little bit of like a mystery, I think, for the internet, because from my kind of judgments of what I've seen, everybody seems to consider everything that comes out of Vancouver to be Ocean Group, Ocean Studios, which is not true because Ocean Studios is one of like many studios in the massive city of Vancouver. So that's certainly not the case. Like, and you were doing stuff at like every place in town. All of you guys really were. Is that right?
Yeah, the Ocean, that's always made me laugh too when I see that. Oh, like for a long time it was on my Wikipedia page by whoever set that up saying, oh, Trevor is one of the many actors at the Ocean Group. And I was like, well, yes, I have worked at Ocean, but it's not like we're part of the family. Like, we're all just contractors that come in and do our thing. But yeah, I mean, Ocean did a ton of anime back in the day. I did my first job there. That's The Lost Continent was at Ocean, which was a prelay series. Also, we did the X-Men series, the first one I did. the one where they're all teenagers.
Oh, X-Men Evolution. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
it, X-Men Evolution.
Oh, yeah,
Well,
no, wasn't no, that was Michael Dobson did Pyro in that show, I think, right?
Oh, oh, aren't you very clever, sir? So very clever.
If you get it, you get it, audience. Anyway. But there's like Westwood and like Dick and Rogers and all these different places too.
Yeah, you know, when you talk about Ocean, what you're talking about is a studio. Right. So they themselves are not really producers. They're more of like facilitators for producers, although they might have different ideas about that definition. But certainly from our perspective, that was it. They were a studio where the shows happened, just like Coco was a studio, or Dick and Rogers, or Cosmic. These were all studios where the shows happened, but they were contractors too, so they would just rent out their studio space to whoever wanted to do their show there. So when you say that we were part of the Ocean Group, that doesn't really mean anything. It's more like I said, well, we worked there, but we also worked at Cosmic and Coco and DNR and GGRP and all these other places too. So yeah.
So kind of going back earlier too, when Lost Continent, you had all these like, the greats who had been doing this for ages by that point. So from getting to know a lot of the veterans, from your research and some of the stuff that you've talked about also on your podcast, which I'm going to get to later, what were the days with Vancouver's VO scene like prior to your time? I know that Ian Corlett was talking about Josanne Lovick of BLT Productions, and he describes her as like the person who brought the animation industry to Vancouver. Do you know like some more about like when there became a big boom for animation voiceover there in general?
A little bit. I know that I just missed it. I know that I got there because it was sort of the late 80s, early 90s, I think, that was really when guys like Gary Chalk and Scott McNeil and Ian Corlett and these guys were able to really like explode onto the scene, because there was like 10 people who did all the work, and there was all of a sudden all this work, and it was really crazily high paid. Like there was a show that I just missed, damn it, called It's the Mr. Hell Show, which is one of my favorite shows ever.
Yeah.
And those were the guys from Vancouver that did that. And Paul Dobson would tell me stories about how they would go in and they would play 8 or 9 principal characters in the show, which, according to the Canadian contract, the UBC contract we have, which is different than the SAG-AFTRA contract, meant a massive payday. So these guys would walk out, have $10,000, $12,000 days sometimes, just from one episode. So it was like the happy days are here again. It was.
Well, sort of, because didn't he also describe that show as like a viper pit of people like, I want that role, I want the money, like
That's
every
right.
other episode.
That's right. That was a term that I think Paul coined, a phrase that he coined called Viper Room casting. Like, okay, guys, we have to cast this another character. Okay, you three, all audition for it right now in front of everybody. Okay.
I want the money, it's mine. Oh my God.
So I don't think that was a very pleasant part of the experience for them. But yeah, so before I got to Van, there was all of these. The other thing too is that in those days they were still doing the Manly Man cartoons. That was when, shows like G.I. Joe and He-Man were still a big thing.
Yeah.
And so when I got to town, of course, that was starting to change. And now all the main characters were sort of teenagers, which cut me out of the mix for a lot of, because I was very manly man in a lot of characters and stuff. So, yeah, that was a piss off, frankly.
So all this work going to Vincent and Matt Hill and Brent Swirl, God damn it.
And hilariously, I think that Sam would also tell you that his first big animation job as what would become his bread and butter, which is that sort of cool kind of, like I'm a 16-year-old guy or whatever. That was The Lost Continent. That was the first show I worked on, and that was his first time really playing a lead character.
Really? Okay.
In that vein, the sort of young teenager. And of course, then he went on to make a massive career out of playing a lot of those
Right, yeah. Well, it's funny because I remember, I forget it was here and Matt were talking about with Ed, Edd n Eddy on like how massive of a show that was, but like because you were talking before about how the money gets involved. It's like Ed, Edd n Eddy, where it's like, man, the residuals on that show must be huge, except they don't do that in Canada. It's all buyouts.
Right.
It's like ooh, yeah.
That's right. I could go on and on about that system. And honestly, we did very well with the buyout system, because the fact is that residuals are great if you're on a show that gets, watched a lot. Mm-hmm. But most shows that we do in Vancouver, or did in Vancouver in those days, really didn't have much viewership. So I used to joke that I've been on every show you've never seen. And so what that benefited us in the long run, because if you do one season of a show and you're waiting for residuals, well, good luck, because it's a dead show. But if you got paid a buyout up front, well, then you don't care if it's a dead show. It's like, oh well, I got paid. So
Well, it's funny because I look at like, because in that time from like the 90s to like the 2000s or so, a lot of the stuff that you guys did were like the you know, the buy the toys show. When actually, didn't you have like a phrase of like sell some toys in 30 minutes, something like that? I forget. It was with
yeah,
like,
that sounds familiar.
yeah. And so a lot of that, and obviously a lot of like the Saturday morning, you know, like Kids WB, Fox kind of anime shows and stuff like that, which is funny because now I looked at like kind of the later stuff with you guys, with two particular shows that seemed so, I imagine must have been really gratifying. One of which was My Little Pony, specifically Friendship is Magic, where like, you know, that was a buy the toy shows that was a massive success in North America. Like, I think more so than anybody ever expected a show like that to do, which I think was great. And I think it's on like season 5 or 6 or something by this point.
7.
Jesus. And then the other one, which is one of my personal favorites for many reasons, not just because the show itself is great, but Black Lagoon, I feel like was the, if any of you guys out there have not seen Black Lagoon, please, for the love of God, do yourself a favor. I think Funimation has it on their website probably. Please watch that shit. It's amazing. I feel like that show was like, okay, you guys have done all these kid shows and anime series for all this time. Here's a show where you can curse. You could say every bad word in existence and have all this meaty, dramatic shit in like a 26 episode show. And I'm just like, God, that must have been so gratifying for everybody in that series after years
sure.
of like, yeah, Transformers and ponies and Mega Man, etc. Like, my God.
It's a rare treat when you get to say terrible things. Marika Hendricks, who played the lead on that, she she got to indulge her inner swear jar quite a bit on that one, which was fantastic. I do a show on Netflix called F is for Family right now, which is the same kind of thing. It's you know, the cruder the better kind of thing. So that's very satisfying.
That's another one. You're like a lot of different guys on that show, yeah.
Yeah, like I said, that's utility guy in action on that one.
So actually, what also anime has been put in the mix, because you haven't done anime in quite a while now, since you've moved out here.
Yeah, it's been a while, yeah.
We've talked a little bit about this in other places too, where like there's a joke about this, like, I guess, like shadow hierarchy with like separating ADR from prelay as if it's like less than. And I know that there's certainly some folks who do a lot more than of one than the other, but for the most part, like when you were in Canada, was it really all just kind of treated as just like, it's just work, it's all just another job, or like was there any of that kind of going on much?
You know, back home, it's kind of ironic actually, because I had a perception of that being the case in Los Angeles, but I'm kind of wrong about that. Okay. As it turns out, people don't. I mean, actors are actors, work is work. They're just happy to be working on anything. So no one's ever going to say to you, well, you know, I don't do anime because you know. Well, maybe somebody will say that to you, but the reason why I don't do anime is because no one's ever asked me down here, is because it doesn't pay as much as the other stuff that we do, and I've been very lucky to be very busy with the other stuff we do, so I just don't have time to do, you know, it's the same reason why I don't do audiobooks. Audiobooks would be a lot of fun, but they're just a huge amount of work, and I don't have time.
Well, the time commitment for that especially, that's like, why would you?
Yeah, for, you know, if you look at the time versus the return, and I don't. I mean, I would if I had the chance to do it. So in terms of a hierarchy, I think that's a bit of a phantom that I was seeing. I don't really think that exists. However, back home, it kind of does exist, but
really?
But it only exists because, I mean, the discrepancy in pay between anime and prelay is galaxies.
Okay.
So consequently, when people get an anime series, it's like, oh, well, you know, something to do. But it's not like, yeah, I booked a mortgage payer.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Well, because it seemed like everybody did everything up there. I mean, there were certainly a few, like Gary Chalk. I'd only ever hear him in like the Transformers anime, just because I imagine he just wanted to do Optimus. But like there were really very few, it seemed like, that would you know, only be exclusively doing one thing more than the other. It seemed like it was just kind of like there's work, and whatever we get, we do because we need the job, kind of thing.
Exactly. And I don't think that any actor that I ever worked with was ever in a position where they were willing to turn down whole sections of the industry just because they thought, oh, well, it's beneath me. Like some of the most working actors I know here, they do anything they can. And it's not because they need the money. It's because they want to stay relevant. It's because they want to keep their chops sharp. It's because all of us really have the same idea about things, which is, yeah, things are great right now, but you never know about tomorrow.
Yeah,
we don't know what next year's going to be.
It's true.
I've been really lucky. I've never really had a bad year. I've had better years than others, but I've never had a year where I thought, oh boy, I'm going to have to get some kind of job, So I've been certainly lucky with that, and I know that I work with a lot of people who are in the same boat. But those same people would be the first ones to say, never take this for granted, man, because you never know what tomorrow could bring. You could dry up, things could suddenly dry up, and then what? So I don't think any actor worth their salt is going to actually be so arrogant as to suggest, oh well, this whole section of the industry is just it's not good enough for
that. Well, what makes me happy too is I think we might have talked about this like a long time ago, but I'm really happy to see so many people who started in anime are really shining. I mean, like Travis Willingham, Laura Bailey, Troy Baker, even guys like that who like they're killing it in prelay, and you as well. Although you were doing so much of everything when you started anyway. Like I was just hearing you like in every show, all throughout my time in school that I won't mention because I don't want to date either of us. Because I remember actually, I think I even joked with you at one point, like when I was watching Mega Man Anti-Warrior, which was a big inspirational show to me as a kid. Most of the time, if I like heard, because this is when I was becoming my walking, talking, and voiceover encyclopedia of myself. If I didn't recognize, like, oh, who's that character? It's probably Trevor. That guy's probably Trevor. Fuck it, whatever. It's probably Trevor.
Well, I'll take that as a compliment.
Right. Actually, I think I even for a long time thought Jonathan Holmes was you doing a British accent.
Oh, that's
just
funny.
Like everybody else. Anyway, so talking about doing other things, though, although not depressing things like getting a job that's not related to your passion. In your long career, you've done a lot of different things in addition to your voiceover work. Obviously, the podcast. You wrote and starred in a play. You've written music. You've traveled to multiple countries, as chronicled in your show. So, I mean, I feel like I know what the answer is to this, but how do you feel that a lot of these just like life experiences have helped grow you as not just a person, but also just as a performer as well?
I wish more people would ask me that question because it's really the heart of everything. I have been teaching. I used to teach for a long time. And one of the first things I used to tell any actor that came to me, whether that was for on camera or voice or whatever, was something that they had a hard time understanding. And that was, in order to be interesting, you have to be interested. In other words, be a person first before an actor. And what does that mean? That means take an interest in the world around you. Not just your hyper-focused world of, well, I'm an actor, and so therefore I'm going to consume all things about acting, and I'm going to read, David Mamet books, and I'm going to take, Uta Hagen courses, and I'm going to do this, and that's all good and fine, but also get lost in Bangkok for a night, and wake up on a beach somewhere, and get on a plane and go to some place that you're afraid of, and not because you're going to get killed, like, don't go to Iraq, but, but go to somewhere where that is going to challenge you as a person and where they don't give a flying fuck whether you're an actor or not. That's the thing, because when you're confronted with the truth of the world, you realize, oh my God, nobody cares if I'm a fucking actor. Nobody cares at all. And nor should they, and nor should you, because in the end of the day, the best actors in the world are those who are real people with real experiences who understand the truth of the world. And so, yes, absolutely, our craft, if you want to call it, is entirely about having more and more life experience, which is why, look at any actor when they're 20 versus any actor, providing they're still in the business, when they're 40. There is a world of difference in the quality of their performance. And I'm talking even the ones that are really naturally good when they're young. because when you have that world, literally that world of experience under your belt, it informs everything you do. It informs your performance. It informs your approach to performance. It informs everything. So I think that's an absolutely crucial thing. Life experience. That's far more important. You know, if someone says to me, "How can I be a better actor?" Well, be a more interesting person first.
Yeah, no, I mean, because I think for all creative people, anybody who works in, any kind of storytelling medium, because actors are storytellers as much as artists, as animators, as writers, etc. And having a greater perspective, having more experiences to draw off of. I mean, even something as simple as like you were joking on some of the podcast episodes about like you'd pick up accents, which is something directly that helped influence your repertoire of acting abilities. For certain, like, or even like trying to learn the language, which influences doing the accent correctly. Yeah, and that's a small thing. It more so like breathing in the culture, like meeting other different types of people with which to draw on the stories that they have to tell, kind of thing. Like, I feel like I don't want to get too ranty about this, but I feel like with the digital age, like there's less and less like inclination for people to want to do that and become less like rounded out as a person and less interesting. I guess that's a blunt but totally true way to perceive it. Yeah.
I think you're completely right, and I think that again, as you say, I don't want to get on a big rant here, but our whole society, as it moves away from human interaction, becomes duller, I think, and it becomes now you have people expressing themselves not in true emotion, but in sort of a mirage, a chimera of emotion. Like this is what emotion is supposed to be, according to my observations, as opposed to I feel this. And maybe I'm just having a senior moment here, but it seems to me,
I think that's true. Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with when I was a kid we used to play in the yard instead of playing a video game. It has nothing to do with that. Well, it actually does.
You
everything
play
to do with
video
that.
games too. Shut your goddamn mouth.
I do. But yeah, like I get, and I am going to sound like an old man here, but when I look at I look at blogs and I look at people's comments and stuff, I just think, really, this is your experience of the world. Interacting on Twitter with somebody, that's the sum total of how you think you can interact with somebody. I don't get it. Maybe I'm one of the last generations that grew up before this stuff was ubiquitous,
Yeah,
but
well,
to come back to performance, yeah, it's all about the human experience. That's the one thing. And people always say to me too, "Oh, well, technology is advancing at such a rate that eventually actors are going to be irrelevant. They'll just digitally create them." No, you can't digitally. If we ever get to the point where we can digitally recreate the human experience, we will be extinct.
yeah.
Because we will no longer be Homo sapiens. We'll be something else. We'll be a new species that has integrated technology so thoroughly into our beings that we will not even be able to relate to each other on what we now, as Homo sapiens, consider to be normal. But wow, I think I should smoke a doobie or something right now. Because we're getting into that sort of
really
conversation.
Yeah, I
Totally.
totally like get you, man. I feel like I'm on like Neptune or some shit. And ending that bit there, this is a little more specific. This is something I actually would love to do when I can afford it. Because a few friends of mine who've been to like Thailand and Hong Kong and all the stuff, they have to say like, God, I really want to. I've only ever been to England and France when I was way too young to appreciate. I was like 7, and I've been to Vancouver. That's the only like out of country travel I've ever had, and it's something that if when the circumstances are right, I would love to do. Would you say that that traveling is certainly like a good way to get more of those kind of experiences that round yourself out?
My answer to you is, why aren't you on the plane right now?
Because plane tickets cost money, and I don't.
Yeah, but
have
you know what?
right now.
There's cheap ways to do it. That's the
true,
thing.
that's
Like,
true.
especially as I discovered when I was in Asia, like, Vietnam and Cambodia, getting there, yeah, it's pricey. But when you're there, oh man,
Yeah,
you can live on like
yeah.
$5 a day.
Thailand, actually, a good friend of mine, Josh Tomar, is a great voice actor as well, and also a very well-rounded person, I would say, because he has been to like a whole bunch of different countries. I think he went to Japan this past year as well. Thailand and some place like that are less expensive to make a full like week or so out of.
Yeah.
But yeah, and also because I remember I really do got to bring this up because it was so funny. Like you had so many good stories about the various people you were running into there and the accents you were picking up from these people and these like almost like you were meeting some cartoon characters in the flesh.
Yeah, for sure.
Any worth sharing that were kind of funny that you could spring to mind?
My first, I was about to say out of body experience. My first out of country experience. Well, not out of country, out of off continent. My first off continent experience was when I first went to Europe, and it was Spain. I went to Spain. Which was a country that I had probably the least interest in out of all the countries in Europe. And I went there because I just broken up with a girl. I was very upset. And a friend of mine over there said, "Hey, you should come and hang out with us in Madrid." And I went, "You know what? Yes, God damn it, I am." So I literally got on a plane and I flew to Madrid. Great experience. First time in Europe. First time away from the continent. So, I mean, I could go on for days telling you the stories. But the signal experience of that trip changed my life forever. It was, and I can't remember if I've told this story on my show or not before, but I was in Barcelona by myself, and I was wandering down the old streets of Barcelona, and around noon or so, and I found this Irish pub, and I thought, okay, well, let's see how the Spaniards handle an Irish pub. As the Irish say, beware a pub abroad, but, you know, you've got to try it out anyway, right? So I walk into this Irish pub, and it's largely empty, but there's this beautiful blonde girl behind the bar. And I go up to the bar and I sit down and I said in my very broken Spanish, "Could I have a drink, please?" And she says to me in Spanish with a heavily Swedish accent, she says, "Sure," you know. And so the only thing really they have on tap, this tells you the quality of this pub, is Foster's. So I was like, okay, sure, give me the Australian beer. Why not? So we get to talking a little bit because she switches to English. And I'm like, oh, thank God I can talk to English. And she is, you know, she is from Sweden. She has been down here for a few months and she is enjoying her time now because this is shortly after the EU was totally made and all of the people can work wherever they want. And that's great. So we're talking away. Next thing I know, to my left, the bar's starting to fill up a little bit. To my left, this great big fella comes in with his wife, and he's an older guy, and he sits down. He sits down right beside me. He says to the bartender, "Hello, I would like a beer, please." And so I turned to him, and I said, in the little bit of German I know from my days when I actually went to German class in university, I said, "Du bist eine Deutschlander?" And he turned to me, and he said, "Ja, ja, und Sie?" I said, "Nein, nein, ich spreche ein bisschen Deutsche, aber nicht so gut." He was like, you know, "Where are you from?" And so, you know, I'm trying to talk to him in German as best I can. I'm saying I'm from Canada. Gut, yeah. His English, super broken. But I'm sitting there, and he would try to speak to me, and I would have to help him with his words, yeah. And we're talking, I'm remember my German, he's remembered his English, talking away, it's great. Then he turns to me and says, "Now we will drink absinthe together." I'm like, "Sure, Fritz, what the hell?" So he's ordering shots of absinthe now. We're drinking this, the day's wearing on. Finally, he turns to me and says, "You will give me your address. I must go back to my hotel now, but you will give me your address, and when I come to Canada, I will stay with you." I'm like, "Sure, Fritz, no problem." So I give him the address. He leaves. Next thing I know, again, bar's getting a little busier. There's this other guy beside me on the other side of me. Looks like a Spanish guy, kind of dark complexion, you know. We're watching the football game, the soccer game, I should say, and drinking our Australian beers. And Fritz is left. But in the street, now there's this commotion going on, this massive commotion. And it's all of these Arabs, and they're angry, and they're marching to the street. They're pissed at something, but they're being orbited by a group of drunken Spaniards who seem to think it's a parade. So I turn to the guy beside me, and I say again in Spanish, "Do you know what that's all about?" And he turns to me and says, in French, "I'm sorry, I don't speak Spanish." So I said to him, "Parlez-vous français?" He said, "Oui, oui." I said, "Je suis un Canadien à l'Ouest." So it turns out this guy is a North African sailor. He's in town for a few days, and he also does not speak English very well, and so I am trying to help him, right? Because his French is very strong, and I parle un petit peu français, as I said. So I'm talking to him a little bit, you know, and I'm remembering my French, and he's remembering his English, and we are speaking and drinking and watching the football game, and he's telling me these stories about, like, this guy was on a freighter outside Miami on September 11th. They had been at sea for 3 months, and they get to Miami, and the Coast Guard comes on board and lets all the white sailors go on shore leave, but none of the dark-skinned sailors. And this guy says, but I'm a citizen of Morocco or wherever he was from. And the Coast Guard said, literally, the Coast Guard said to him, you could be Osama's fucking cousin for all I know. And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? This is crazy. So meanwhile, as I'm talking to this guy, Fritz comes back, but this time he's brought all his German buddies. And I'm like, oh my God. Oh, I should mention, by the way, something I forgot to point out. Fritz was in the Hitler Youth. As a child. Yes. Yes, but that was a tiny detail that I skipped over. Fritz was in the Hitler Youth. So anyway, he comes back now, except he's got all of his German buddies. And I'm like, Fritz, you're back? He says, yeah, I could not leave this without introducing all of my friends to the only North American I have ever met who truly understands the German people. So there I am. I'm drinking absinthe with the German on the left of me. I'm drinking Australian beer with the North African sailor speaking French to the right of me. We're being served by a Swedish waitress in an Irish pub in the middle of Spain. And that, my friend, changed my whole life.
Is this all one night?
This is all in one afternoon.
Holy shit. Wow.
I was so drunk, I stumbled out of there. I don't know what the hell time it was. I don't know how I got back to the hotel. But
suppose you remember it all. Swear to God. I know you. I do not believe you, because I would have remembered that story on your podcast. So I feel like I've just got an exclusivity deal. Wow, holy shit! I feel like my life has changed just from hearing that. So in conclusion, everybody go to Spain.
Well, go anywhere and just be open to the experiences. Go anywhere with an open mind, and just go into any new culture and say, all right, let's see what this is all about. You know.
And take away with it whatever you get from it.
Exactly. And it's always going to be different, and everybody's stories are going to be different, right? Like that's what's so cool about it, is that there's no two roads that are the same, that are trod the same way. And much as it is in our own careers. You know, people always say to me, oh, well, you know, how did you get to LA and how did you get to where you are now? Well, it doesn't matter, because everybody's road is different. I mean, I can give you all the advice in the world, but at the end of the day, your road is going to look totally different than mine. That's just the way it is, right?
My God, I don't even want to talk about voiceover anymore. I just want to kind of play it right now. My God, I guess. For one thing, I was going to ask for like advice, but I think honestly that entire bit in and of itself, right there, more than explains. Because also it's very different than just take classes and whatever. Right. It's like, no, have a life. I think is good enough to go with.
And I mean, like, classes are good for, like, the technical stuff you need to know, like how to work with a microphone and how not to talk over the director and how to not make noise with the script pages and stuff like that. But you can learn that in, like, half an hour. All that stuff.
Yeah, that's true. You can go to D. Bradley Baker's website and just read all that shit and be like, oh, well, now I know it. Good.
Exactly. But really what you're bringing to the performance as an actor is your life experience. Mm-hmm. And you're bringing, a new takes on old things based on the experiences you've had. So, yeah, absolutely. That's the advice. Go, explore, live.
I think a good way to cap this out, my last question I have on my outline here. So you were talking before, you've had pretty solid years in terms of like consistent work, and you have gotten to work with a whole lot of really, really amazing people, especially since you've gotten here too. Mm-hmm. When you've got a really busy year, say you're doing like multiple shows at the same time, whether it was back up there or down here today, what is a regular week like for you in terms of recording and like the people that you're with and just life as it is?
I don't know if there's such thing as a regular week. It's always different. It really is always different. Like, I'm on multiple shows right now, but we don't record every week for every show. So sometimes I'm doing 5 or 6 sessions a week. Sometimes I'm doing 2, like this week. I think this week I have 1, which is really weird. It's like, I only did 1. What the hell am I going to do for the rest of the time?
What am I doing? Am I doing something wrong? Oh, God.
Yeah, I guess I'll do interviews on Skype. What the
Yay.
So it kind of ebbs and flows like that. So for me, oh boy, virtually every day there's new auditions that come in. So I go into my studio and I bang those out, typically in the morning, get them done, and then I'll go to a session if I have it. Like, we're doing Guardians of the Galaxy right now, so that records new shows typically once every 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. But on alternating weeks, we do ADR and pickups. So I'm pretty much working on that show once a week on something. But then, I'm also on Lego Star Wars, so we'll come in to do an episode of that, or we'll do pickups for that. Or right now, like we just finished doing 10 more episodes of F is for Family, so in a very little while we'll be coming to do pickups for that, and then after that there'll be ADR for that. And I'm also doing a ton of writing right now. Like, I can't really talk about it on the show, but there's a bunch of kind of high-profile projects that I've been hired to do as a writer, which is great, fantastic. So that's all going great. So, yeah, a regular week. I mean, I'm busy for sure. I'm not busy like someone who works for the UN is busy, but like I'm busy in short, concentrated bursts. So like Tuesday, Wednesday, crazy busy. Oh my God. But Thursday, wide open. Okay. So I'll just hang out at the gym on Thursday, or I'll watch South Park over and over and over again, or
why wouldn't you really?
Because why wouldn't you? Exactly.
Oh my God.
So yeah, I don't think there's anything as a normal week, but
normal is bizarre, more or less.
Yeah.
So actually, on the note of Galaxy, so that is Vanessa Marshall, Kevin Michael Richardson, Will Friedel, and oh God, who else? Help me.
David Sobolov.
David Sobolov, of course, another Canadian.
Yes, that's true.
Vancouver guy. What is? I imagine that show in and of itself has got to be a gift with just those guys.
Man.
And I'm sure like the guest stars that come on. I don't know if you guys get to record with everybody all the time, but what is the room like for that show in particular? Since that's a big relevant one right now.
When we started doing Guardians of the Galaxy, we all sort of fell into a pattern very quickly. We knew what our relationship was to each other, and it was like a family very, very quickly. Talk about a comfortable experience. It's just been tremendous with those guys. Will Friedle and I have become quite close, which is great. He's one of my favorite people. He's a smart-ass jerk, but he's great. He's fantastic. Vanessa is one of my favorite people as well. She's just so talented and so hardworking, and just great. Everybody. Kevin is an old hero of mine. I remember the first time I worked with him. I was talking with the first day, and I said to him, "Oh my God, Kev, you were Saravok in Baldur's Gate." And he went, "What?" I said, "Saravok, you were the big bad guy in Baldur's Gate." And he went, "Oh yeah, that was like one of my first video games, I think. You remember that?" I'm like, "Remember it? Are you kidding? How could I forget? Oh my God, man!"
Which is like, get this guy security, get this guy away from me.
That's right. So that was about as fanboy as I get with anybody, but it's great. And like we have a bunch of guest stars on the show, as you mentioned. Like Jonathan Frakes plays Star-Lord's father on it, and he is so much fun. Oh my! And it's hilarious this season actually, because he's been directing a show up in Oregon for months and months, so he hasn't been able to come back and do stuff with us. So I've been scratching him. I've been filling in for him while he's not there. And of course, as time has gone on, I've just done my Jonathan Frakes impersonation, and everybody is they're just killing themselves. In fact, now some of the Marvel executives have been watching the rushes and going, was that Trevor or Jonathan? I can't even tell.
Oh, Lord. Well, better than your David Kaye impression. I'm just also, you're speaking of Johnny Test a billion years ago. James Taylor is all over that show as like a bunch of different guys also.
Yes. James.
He's wonderful.
James is also one of my best friends out here. He has been really one of the guys that's completely welcomed me when I got to LA. He's been so encouraging. He's spread the word about me. He's sort of indirectly been responsible for getting me into rooms and stuff. So he's helping me put the finishing touches on my recording studio. It's great. But yeah, he plays multiple characters on that show as well. Yeah, fantastic.
Going back to looping back around to Vancouver again. I mean, you guys have had so many stories about all the shows you guys have done together. Countless series over decades. But so do you still go back to Vancouver to record stuff like on a semi-frequent basis, or?
Yeah, I was for a long time. When I first got here, I was going back like once every week, every week or two. So it was exhausting the first year because the vast majority of my work was still up there. And then gradually in the second year, it started to shift. And now it's to the point, I still am doing shows up there, but most of the time I actually record from down here. Okay. So we did a show called we do a show called Dino Trucks for DreamWorks, and we're still recording that. And I record that from down here, and the rest of the cast is in a room back home. Um, when I am up there, they try and organize it so that I can record with people. But it's rare now. It's kind of like once every 3 months or so now I pop up. In fact, the last time I went, it wasn't even for work. If it was just to visit.
I mean, I imagine now when you do get to be with like the old guard and record all together, like that's got to be like nostalgic as hell. Like, you know, being
It's
in a
great.
room with those guys. I mean,
Yeah.
I know there's like a few shows that in particular that were like big favorite. Like Dragon Booster, I know was one that was talked about, which I don't even. I saw a lot of the other Nerdcore shows. I don't remember if we got Dragon Booster.
Yeah,
I mean, we
it
probably
didn't really do that great in the States. I think it did okay in international markets, but not so
Okay.
much in the US.
But I know that was the big favorite for you. But like really like big moments, because I know that there's so many to go over. But like you know, with people like Tabitha and Drummond and the Super Dobson brothers and Scott and all these guys, like any particular moments or any fun things that pop to mind about that too.
I love every time I get to work with them. When I get to go home and be in a room with those people, it really does feel like coming home. And they like roll out the red carpet for me, man. They make me feel like I'm a returning conqueror, you know. It's just great. It's interesting because somebody, I won't say who, but somebody said to me before I left for LA, they said to me, you know, you're kind of the test probe for us. They said, if you go down and do good, you know, we just report your findings back here because, and so sure enough, you know, I was very lucky. I had a lot of great things happen to me down here, and now there's a bunch of guys back home who are going, you know, if Devall's doing a good job.
Wow. Hey, well, I mean, and David and actually both Davids, both Kay and Sobolov have done very well. So,
Yeah. Oh,
you
yeah.
know.
I mean, David Kay is a self-made man, and he has also been down here, you know, for basically 15 years.
Yeah.
So he really was setting roots a long time ago. But like now, I mean, Ian Corlett spends a lot of time down here. He's got
That's
he's got an
right.
apartment just down the street. Actually, we hang out all the time. Seeing him tonight for dinner, as a matter of fact. And you know, I know that Vincent Tong was sort of like looking at possibilities. Michael Dangerfield, even Sam Vincent has sort of expressed interest in. Well, maybe I'll look into, you know, the possibilities there. So it's Doran Bell as well. He's sort of down here half the time now. So there's a lot of the old gang that's going. Well, maybe we'll see what's going on down there. So
Completely selfishly, I want Tabitha to show up here and just like fucking clean shop.
you know,
Just, like,
I think
dominate.
out of all the folks back there, she would be the last one to do it.
Really?
Yeah, and there's a lot of reasons for that, but she sort of did her time in the States a lifetime ago, and I think she's like, no, I'm good. I'm good
Fair.
here.
That's fair. Yeah, every time I hear her or anything, she's a joy. My God.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's a lot of people. Like I remember my friend Mark Meir, who was big video game guy. He was the Mass Effect Commander Shepard. He's based in Edmonton, and I know him from way back. And you know, I see Mark a lot at conventions and stuff, and we hang out and stuff. And he's a great guy, old friend. But I said to him, so you know, you must be planning on coming down here, and he was like, no. I'm like, but. Like you're on this giant wave. You could completely use it to get down. He was like, nah, not interested. I got a good life here in Edmonton, and I work enough. I'm like, well, great, man. That's awesome. I mean, I wish I could say that I was able to stay in Edmonton and do what I wanted to do, but it certainly got that way for me.
Well, there's more to life sometimes, kids. Don't be ashamed about that at all.
There sure is.
Oh my God. Last thing I wanna say, because I want to give all sorts of props. So I want to give a plug to those of you guys who have not taken a listen to Voiceprint with Trevor Devall and guests, which I will have a link to in the description of this video. It is I think 20, 30, I forget how many episode series where
36,
Trevor,
I think.
Oh, 26, okay. Where Trevor basically interviewed virtually almost every major Vancouver voice actor that you would know of from every cartoon, anime, game up there. All incredibly funny, interesting, in-depth stories. And talking earlier, your bit about James Arnold Taylor, like indirectly, you know, influencing where you're going. I give so much credit to the stuff that I learned in my first couple years of starting in VO when I was in New York, on the stuff that I learned from what Trevor and all of his guests had to say. It prepared me so much on all the basics about just being professional and some of the technical stuff and just knowing the terminology and etc. And it was incredibly useful and also incredibly entertaining and has kept me company while animating for years and years. I've probably listened to every episode at least like 2 or 3 times.
Well, thank you very much.
Actually, funnily enough, speaking of Ian, I was just because I wanted to have a little refresher on the early days of the Vancouver history stuff. I was listening to the one about Ian a while ago. And also Richard Cox's one with the farting and
oh God,
it's always funny to me. And just lots of great stuff. There's one of my favorites is Paul Dobson's horror stories about living in England as a kid and getting shit kicked out of all the time, and Tabitha when she lived in South Africa and all this stuff. There's so much entertaining stuff because Rob Paulsen's Talking Tunes podcast is big and gets a lot of big ups from people, but Voiceprint deserves much love. So please, if you guys, especially if you're either, even if you're not interested in getting into voice acting, but if you want to hear these really interesting things from all these voices of your childhood, basically check out Voiceprint because it's fully worth it.
I think we predated Rob Paulsen's show. I think
you did. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, but
so he stole my idea.
Yes. Someone should sue. I have actually. Have you met and or worked with Rob yet?
Here's my thing. There's a number of guys that okay. So for example, Billy West, Rob Paulsen, and even Maurice LaMarche. Mm-hmm. So these are 3 giants in the industry. And I have been in the same room with them many times, but it's never been a studio. It's never been a record. And I refuse to be introduced to them until I'm working with them. Okay. Because I don't want to be introduced to them as some guy in a crowd because they're not going to remember who I am. But they will remember me if I'm actually, like Tom Kenny, for example. I have met Tom numerous times, and it's always been in session. So I have no problem saying that I know Tom because I do. I see Tom at the local pub and I'm like, hey, and we sit down and we talk about stuff. That's far more important to me than to be able to say, oh yes, well, I met such and such. So I want to work with these guys. So have I met Rob Paulsen? No, I've been right next to him, but mm-hmm. I don't even extend my hand unless it's going to be in the studio as an equal.
Well, I can certainly hope that if that day does come, that there will be some kind of crossover podcast between the two of you because I need that in my life so badly.
That'd be a great idea.
Because I miss your show. I know that you frankly haven't had time to do it in a long time, but I desperately miss it because it was so entertaining and so insightful. So
well, thank you very much.
Cross my fingers for that someday. I guess very last thing I promise this time. Anything maybe you can? I mean, I know Final Fantasy 15 is a big thing. Kingsglaive just came out and had a theatrical run for a little bit, which is a big thing. I saw that character and said, "Oh, I didn't know Mordred Payne was in Final Fantasy." Any stuff with that, or any other upcoming things that you can talk about that you want to plug?
Boy, there is so much upcoming, and I'm trying to remember what I can and cannot speak about. Probably none of it. More Guardians. We're doing, like I said, we're in the middle of recording 2nd season now, which is awesome. Which is very cool. Lego Star Wars as well, Freemaker Adventures. We're still going strong with that, which is cool. Doing Kingsglaive was neat, was great. I look forward to seeing the game. Whether I'm in it or not, I cannot say, but I look forward to seeing the game because it looks cool. But there is a big video game coming out, which I've already been announced for sort of unofficially on the trailer they put out, and it's called it's a Saints Row spinoff, and it's called oh boy.
You've really done it now.
Really done it now. Yeah, I'm League of something. Anyway,
not Legends, although you're in that too.
Not League of Legends. Oh man, maybe I'm getting confused. Anyway, it's I'm one of the main guys in it. And it's so much fun. The dialogue is just masterfully done. And I'll remember the name of the show any second now. Or the game.
Quick, do a Google search. I won't tell anybody.
The reason why I never remember this stuff is because when we record this stuff, it's always under code names.
Yeah.
So, Project, Nemesis or something. And so I'm like, oh yeah, another session of Project Nemesis. Not, because we don't call it by what it actually is. So I think I've seen the name of the show maybe twice, in print. But anyway, it's cool. You'll know it when you see it,
You'll know
because
it.
I'm playing a classic Trevor Devall character.
The Han Solo type, I hope.
Pretty much.
That's okay with me. Beautiful. I guess that's gonna wrap us up. So, Trevor, thank you so much for giving me an hour of your time. This was awesome.
My pleasure.
The order of when these go up, I guess, will be determined later. But Trevor's the first that I've recorded. In terms of just I'm time traveling right now. But this was awesome. And I guess Twitter, Facebook, anything you want to plug for people to follow you on, etc.
Twitter, which I do try and look at every now and then, at Trevor Devall, I think is my thing. Other than that, I've got a website, trevordevall.com. But just look for me on the screen.
Yes. Beautiful. That's going to wrap us up. So in the comments below, everybody, leave any and all thoughts, memories, opinions, anything you have whatsoever about perhaps your favorite cartoon, anime, video game done up in Vancouver, perhaps anything that Trevor has done in particular, any stories, perhaps if you've met Trevor or any of the Vancouver guys at a convention before, any funny stories. I'm sure you'll have plenty about Scott, most likely. And look forward to whatever the next one will be. I'm not going to say because I don't know what the order will be, but I hope you enjoyed this, and there will be much
Agents
more to
of
come.
Mayhem. That's what it's called. Agents of Mayhem.
Go look up Agents of Mayhem and check out Trevor and that shit. It'll be great. Beautiful. That's it for me. That's it for Trevor. And we will catch you all on the flip side. Listen to Voiceprint and you'll get it. Bye.